So to
bottom and of your screen and enter your question along with your name and your state. We will get to as many questions as we can. We've already spoke with Jennifer and she's excited for the questions that we'll do at the conclusion of our discussion. So with that note, I'd like to introduce, it is my pleasure to introduce our featured guest this evening, Jennifer Sirangelo. She's a believer in youth people and their capacity to change the world. That's pretty impressive. She is a champion for youth, especially girls and minorities, in their pursuit of careers in agriculture. Jennifer leads National 4-H Council in its mission to expand opportunities for all of America's youth through increased investment and participation in cooperative extension 4-H's positive youth development programs. In 2017, Jennifer was named to Fast Company's annual list of the 100 most creative people in business. It's pretty cool. And in 2020, she was honored with the Gold Stevie Award for Female Executive of the Year. She's a Missouri native. Jennifer currently serves on the AgriCorps board and is an advisor to the Global 4-H Network Board, a Farm Foundation Fellow, and a big fan of AFBF. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being our first featured guest on the Ag ConnectHER. We're so pleased to have you here today. Well, we'd like to just get started. I guess it's you and I. So again, such a pleasure to meet with you today. I'd first like to ask you if you could just share a little bit about yourself, where you came from, kind of how you got to where you're at, and just I don't know, just anything you'd like to share through that journey.
Great. Well, thank you so much. But first, Sean, before I say anything about myself, I want to start by saying thank you to you for being a 4-H leader for 10 years. And so glad to meet you. I love meeting 4-H alumni that are doing, amazing things and giving back. And I love seeing your leadership, not only on your family farm, but here at AFBF and with other women. So just like a true 4-H'er, you're continuing to lead. So I love it.
It takes us all.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So thank you for, giving back to the kids as a 4-H leader. We couldn't do it without our volunteers, as you well know. So
you're welcome.
Anyway,
yes.
Yeah, just a little bit about me. So I'm a Midwest gal. I grew up, as I mentioned, in Kansas City, right on the line between Missouri and Kansas. And so I'm a big sister. First of all, I'm the eldest of 4, and my dad worked 2 jobs. We were a very hardworking family, I would call it blue collar or less. So I came out, my mom said I came out leading. So, but when you have younger siblings, I was basically the help, as those of you that have other big families know. So I am very thankful to be a part of a big family that I still stay close to, despite, all my travels and work. But, and just to kind of fast forward, and when I was in college, I had kind of a Damascus Road moment where I really knew I wanted to, I kind of just realized I wanted to be in the nonprofit sector. I really got it kind of through Habitat for Humanity. If any of you've ever done one of those Habitat things, and I got to meet somebody who had a job doing what I really wanted to do, like enjoy doing. And I was like, there's a nonprofit world. I didn't know those jobs existed. So that kind of opened my eyes, and I never went back. And I started doing a number of few things, but by 1999, I was in Kansas City and I found youth development. And that was through Boys and Girls Clubs in my local community. And I walked in, I just loved it. I love looking at how to develop young people outside of the school setting without the pressure of school and the grades, but that belonging, that mastery, getting to learn things. And then in 2001, I went to New York to work for Boys and Girls Clubs in New York City. I worked in the whole Northeast region, so rural, urban, everything. That was fun. And then in 2006, 4-H came and found me, actually. They were looking to grow the 4-H program, and especially in STEM. That was right before STEM got big. And I was so excited because I love STEM as a girl, but I hit the wall when I was in high school, when I got to calculus 2 and there was no other girls. And I didn't want to be the only girl, and I was like, I want
Yeah.
to change this for other girls. So anyway, that took me to 4-H, and I've been there for 17 years. And I fell in love
Wow.
with 4-H and agriculture. And so I came in as a youth development expert. And today I am just feel so fortunate to be in the ag industry. I've had a lot of mentors who've put me under their wing and helped me understand agriculture. And I just, that's what brought me to today. And then 10 years ago, I had a mentor who was the former CEO of the National 4-H Council, a man who saw potential in me, gave me hard feedback, and helped me compete for and earn the right to be the CEO. And I've been doing that for 10 years.
So I'm curious on this real quick. I always
Uh-huh.
love when somebody says hard feedback,
Oh
because
yeah.
oftentimes, as women in leadership positions, we're
Uh-huh.
placed in a lot of different scenarios. So do you mind me asking what some of that hard
Sure.
feedback was? I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
Well, for me, it was a couple things. Number one, first of all, I was still kind of coming out of being almost like an individual contributor.
Mhm.
So, when you're a high achiever and, as I mentioned, a leader, we can all get very focused on the outcomes and not worry as much about the people along the way. And I was definitely in that category. And I just was I didn't have the emotional intelligence to understand my impact on other people. And that's what my mentor, I give him so much credit because we were very close and we're still very close. I just talked to him this week, funny enough. But he made the effort to invest in me. Everyone else before that, my bosses, they were just glad I was going to keep raising the money, and they didn't care they didn't care as much about my advancement. They were just glad if I kept raising the money. So I appreciated that Don saw me for more than that and saw that I could be a leader beyond just the revenue. And it was hard. And I actually went to like a boot camp and everything, got like 360s. And that's when I began to realize when you're a leader, you are under constant scrutiny. And you just have to be ready for it and embrace it as growth, not as criticism. And that's been a huge learning for me. And I know it's made me a better leader.
And I think sometimes as leaders, it can be lonely, right? I mean, or it can be, if you're just like my work ethic just takes over and you kind of just want to
Yes.
get the job done. And then, so it's very interesting to hear that. And so that mentor played obviously a very important role. Do you feel like he was your main mentor throughout that season that really was life-changing for, like, maybe career altering for you, or were there other mentors along the way?
Yeah, there was definitely others. And interesting, you had this question in the list and I reflected on it. And I have had other mentors along the way, but active mentor who I worked very closely with and kind of watched. For me, I have had others. The CEO of the local Boys and Girls Club was also really important to me, taught me all about board development. And then I watched the first female CEO I'd ever worked for was at the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. And I watched her more from afar. I didn't work directly for her, but I got to do meetings with her and I got to watch kind of excellence in action. And so I'm very big on bringing along kind of almost more for the observation of it. Like, what does a leader look like? What does a leader sound like in a top to top meeting? How does a leader engage? That stuff you can't learn at MBA. You have an MBA. I have an MPA, but you don't learn that at grad school. You learn that by watching great leaders. So I'm very big on in person and, bringing staff along with me especially in my high level meetings. So
you
they can
kind of
watch
hit
it.
on emotional intelligence, I think is like a big key, big key leadership word these days. But I've always equated it to like the bedside manner of nurses and doctors, but in a leadership standpoint. And it sounds like that's something that you've developed over time, but you also have self-recognition on it.
You think your
First
mentor
step.
kind of, yeah, right? That's always first step. Here we are. But do you, I'm just, and we're going a little off script here, so I'll get back
All right.
on, but while we're heading that direction, do you feel like your mentor was kind of helped walk you through that? Because sometimes we can't see where we need to go.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, addressing it with me first, but then also being he was actually a very emotive leader.
Mhm.
And so I got to see what that looked like. And I got to see how he fiercely defended, and really, when I say fiercely defended, the work-life balance of his employees. So for me and others, he would be like our defense mechanism if my work ethic went crazy or whatever. And I've just tried to model that for my staff. Like, I just thought I've never seen a leader that way, who was so adamant with folks to take care of themselves and prioritize family and everything. And so I've really tried to, and I feel good about that in my organization. I've really led with that in many ways.
Mhm.
And I'm very happy that that's something that really trickles down. And I
Mhm.
just did a new employee kind of virtual luncheon, and I talked about work-life balance. And these were employees who've been with us for less than 2 months. And two of them raised their hand and wanted to tell their story of how they had found already in the organization, their leaders had supported them when they had a family issue or whatever. And I was like, that's music to my ears. You've only been here a
Yeah.
couple of months and you already feel that in our culture. So
I think that's a breath of fresh air for others who maybe haven't had that support in that area, and when they come to an organization like that. But also, um, you're probably, I'm going to guess, able to maybe start attracting the type of leaders you're looking for, or the people you're looking for into your organization, to help build that. One question I have for you is, what are some of the challenges that you faced along your journey? So, we always love to talk successes, but those challenges are sometimes in the trenches where we learn the most. So very curious to hear from you.
yeah. Well, I would say I wanted to kind of talk more about, I was thinking that's good. I was thinking a little bit about kind of the environmental things that
Mhm.
I don't mean environment,
No.
physical, I mean ecosystem, kind of
Mhm.
that. So I would start by saying first is about expectations of women in the workplace and at home. And I've really kind of gotten over that by this point, but I made choices as a woman to prioritize my career. Not everyone agrees with me, but I have done that, and that's been my choice. And my husband supported me and wanted that too. So I think first is those expectations of people. And so earlier in life, when I was younger, I let that affect me a lot more. Like I would I would stress out because women, we have to do like the Christmas cards. We have to buy all the Christmas gifts. We have to do the decorating. We have to make sure there's the birthday cakes at the parties. And so I've really learned, like, I've let my husband start sending the gifts. Even though they're not what I would pick. Okay. They're not what I would pick, but it's okay. I don't have to make the cake. I can buy the cake.
Mhm.
So just, and, I don't have to have the perfect Christmas cards I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but that's the kind of stuff makes us
I
nuts
know.
is
Yep.
I'm like, I need a wife. I don't have a wife. My husband's
Yeah.
busy
And
working.
the
So am
guilt.
I.
Yeah. And the guilt that we carry sometimes
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
that
So
season of, mhm,
that's one of the challenges I've had, but I've really,
mhm,
as I've gotten older, it's gotten easier and clearer, and I've carved out kind of how I support my family, which is a little
mhm,
different than maybe somebody else supports their family, right? So like their parents and everything. And then I would say another thing is a challenge that I've experienced as a leader is having much bigger dreams than my resources of my organization would support. So
mhm,
I'm sure everyone can understand that if you want to grow your
mhm.
business or you want to, any of the organizations you run, you always have bigger dreams than the resources that we have. So that's been one of the challenges, is kind of how to make those hard choices. And I've had to make some hard choices like that. Like as an example, when I became CEO, one of the things we had been exploring was global 4-H. And you heard in my intro that I'm still involved as a volunteer with the global 4-H board, which is a legacy of my predecessor who helped start that. But we just, in 4-H, we have so much to do domestically, and we just don't have enough capacity to do everything. So I had to make some hard choices that we were not going to pursue active, engagement. We still participate, as in the global work, but global community, but we're not driving growth of 4-H in other countries, as an example. And that's really hard because, to be honest, I know 4-H changes and saves lives, and it's very hard not to do that. But we have to make choices. So that's a kind of some of the things I've had, challenges for me have been resources and how you make those priorities. And lastly, I'll be real quick, and that's that I've been underestimated. When you're blonde haired, blue eyed, and you're 30 years old, running an organization, you're underestimated. You can promise you're going to get underestimated. And so I can share some tips later or whatever you want on kind of how I've navigated to maintain the respect I needed to lead in an organization and that kind of thing. So I can get down to the nitty gritty when you're ready.
I love it, because that was kind of where I was going to go.
Yeah.
I feel like through, my seasons of changes and growth, and hopefully still growing quite a bit, but there are times when I have walked into, say, a business meeting, and it's a full table of men. And I know that I'm fully equipped and ready for those conversations, but there's still the thing that takes place. You either have to do self-talk and get yourself ready that you're heading into, or, those are some of the challenge that I think, we as women leaders trying to get our confidence in such a place that we know that we're going to be a voice that needs to be heard at the table. Can you share a time or kind of something speak to that? Have you had those situations, or have you felt like through 4-H that you've, in your journey, that you've been fortunate not?
Yeah. Well, let me start with, I understand that being the only woman in the table, that's for sure. Even in the nonprofit world, that happens. But of course, in agriculture, it happens. We all know it is the case. And it's happened to me for sure. But let me tell you kind of the more, I hope that people don't think I'm totally weird with this answer. But again, I'm just being myself, and you asked me, so you're getting me.
Perfect.
But one thing, this answer I actually discovered in a very weird place. Here I am talking about global, and I was in Ghana at a 4-H club, and it was in my volunteer work. I wasn't starting it or anything, but I was there visiting with the organization I'm on the board of called AgriCorps. Anyway, we're there. The girls, it's in Ghana, it's just like in the US, the girls are leading. And so the girls were president of the club, vice president of the club. So the girls heard that the president of 4-H in the US was coming to their club, and it was a woman. So they were prepared with great questions. And I had this Naomi who pulled me aside and asked me, Jennifer, how do you lead with the men? And she was like, there was no small talk. She had a question for me, and we had a little time, and she was going to get that question in. And in that moment, I came up with an answer that I like to share with American women too.
Yeah.
But I was like on the spot. I had to talk about, what I said? I said, Naomi, stay close to the money and understand the finances. I said, if you can generate money, if you can understand finances, if you can be a good businesswoman, you will be respected by the men. And it came out. I didn't plan that. That was just gut instinct. And to be honest, I've realized, I know why I said it. It's true. It's been my experience. And I will tell you, the larger the pots of money I am in charge of, the more respect I get from the men. And I know it sounds weird, but it's like they have certain things they respect, and that's one of them.
Yes.
And so getting your MBA, even if you don't have time to go get fancy education, educate yourself. Like right now, I'm working on educating myself on private equity and investments and things, because 4-H is fortunately in a different place than we've been before. And so I think no matter where you are in your journey,
Mhm.
if you're interested in doing business with any gender, understand the money. And so for me, I was part of generating the revenue. I was in sales, the equivalent in nonprofit fundraising. When you can generate money, they don't care if you're purple. They want you on their team, or if you're blonde and young or whatever. And so I that's one of my pieces of advice, and I hope that women don't think that's too crass, but that's part of our problem is we think, hey, it's just a
Mhm.
part of business, and it's part of what makes business work. And being able to talk about it, work, the real estate you guys handle is huge, and educating yourself. And it doesn't have to be fancy book educating,
Mhm.
but just being interested, connected to it, understanding it, having your own point of view on the finances of whatever you're involved in is critical.
Yeah, I found that at times, it's when we're talking like economics talk, if you're on point and you can actually have those healthy conversations, or even bring points to the table, that it does gain respect. So, and really that probably applies to really any arena you're talking about. So whether it's corn or growing on your farm, or your 4-H club, or wherever you're talking,
Your
the
association,
Mhm.
and you need to be
Mhm.
able to talk about your membership, the
Yeah,
dynamics, the financial dynamics. Yeah.
very good. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So what
Thank
are your
Naomi. Thank Naomi in Ghana, the president
Naomi
of her
Gata?
4-H club.
That's a
Yeah.
great story. Thank you for sharing that too. I'll think about Naomi. What are your top 3 leadership tips for women in agriculture?
Yeah. So first is I would encourage you to do what we're doing tonight, and that's
Yep.
tell your story. Make sure you don't hide your story under a bushel basket. Don't, one thing I'm guilty of, and I'll be honest, even today, I'm guilty of it. I'm like, who cares about, like, my story isn't special. Why would anyone want to hear?
Oh,
That's how we kind of feel about
I
ourselves,
know.
right? And
Yeah.
so, but what I've learned, and the 4-Hers have taught me this, is that, and like I said at the beginning, watching other leaders taught me, just observing them, hearing them, watching them. So I have learned to kind of put my doubts about why anybody would want to hear my story aside and share it anyway, so that I can bless other people and just trust that it will be taken that way. So that's my first thing, is tell your story. So that means not being afraid, or not thinking that it doesn't matter or it's not special. We can all learn from each other. Second thing is, I do want to encourage us to become mentors for other women. My journey has been almost exclusively, it has been men that have seen my potential, given me a break, and given me that step change opportunity that was a stretch, and they had
Mhm.
to believe in me, but that's what, gave me a step change. It has, in my case, only been men that have done that.
That's interesting.
So I have a couple thoughts about that. One is, we need
Mhm.
to be doing that more. I need to be doing that more for women.
Mhm.
Second, I want to encourage those of you that have sons and men in your life to and make sure they see their role in doing that. So whether it's your son who's getting his first supervisor job, or it's your brother who's doing, just encouraging you to think about how you can coach them about how they can play a significant role for women. The last one is, and this one we can go on to more, but I'm gonna do my last real tip is about ourselves. That's being patient with ourselves. For me, I've had moments when I've been way too ambitious and I've tried to do too many things at one time. And I should have taken a breath and let myself take it step at a time. The other thing last piece I want to say about listening to ourselves is that I can say at this point in my career, always follow your instincts. Always.
Jennifer, I feel like I'm sitting with a life coach right now. Thank you so much for sharing those 3 points. Like they've hit as I've grown and as I walk through my journey, they're just hitting on everything, of which I think as you grow older, you start to learn more and more to rely on your instincts. I've got 2 boys. It warms my heart to hear you share, to mamas raise your babies up,
Yep.
to value women, to mentor everyone, but also to not set anyone aside when you see potential in them. That's just tremendous. And to tell your story, so many times, even today, I thought, oh, am I like capable of like, interviewing Jennifer? Like she's kind of this rock star, and but again, it's like it's just my pleasure to sit here beside you and learn from you, and that opportunity supersedes any of my insecurities of wanting to think that I can't do this. So thank you so much for sharing that. Those are very inspiring words. I hope Carrie's jotting that down so we can put that together to send out to everyone. I think we have a few minutes here, so I kind of want to wrap up, but I do think, how do we help? And I think you've kind of answered this in some ways, but how do we help prepare the next generation of women leaders to assume leadership roles? AFBF, women's leadership, this is kind of one of our main focuses, but would love to hear from you, your thoughts on this.
Yes. Well, I have kind of already talked a little bit about it, but the one part I would say, I have a couple of little unique things, and I just had an experience of this today. But one is obviously always being open to being a coach. So, kind of putting yourself out there a little bit, and not thinking I have to be some great person to be a coach. You don't, to help others. We all know that we see when it's someone else's issues, we can see them much more clearly, and we don't all have to pay for therapists to have that. We have each other, and we can, in a trusting relationship, that can happen to be kind of a coach. And what I wanted to share is a concept that one of my friends brought to me years ago that I have tried to bring forward, and that is a concept of peer mentoring. So we often think of a mentor as someone who's older, wiser, more experienced, and then I'm a mentee and I'm younger. I have had less experience. I need to, I get to learn. So it's kind of almost a bit of a one way. But I've explored this many times, and I've really benefited from a peer mentoring mindset, I would say. Mm-hmm. So as an example, today I had in town my friend who is the CEO of 4-H Canada. And so we had lunch yesterday in Washington, and today we spent the afternoon and we shared each other's strategic plans. And you wouldn't believe how much we learned from each other. Like, in fact, 10 years ago when we did the same thing, she helped change the trajectory of kind of where 4-H headed in the US, some of the information we were working on. So that peer mentoring is critical. And so you don't even have to call it that, but, but like you said, taking that time, like it's lonely. And so you don't have to necessarily go find someone that's already done what you want to do. It's just more finding someone you can trust, that you can share your issues with, have a trusted place to talk. And I call that peer mentoring. And to me, I also like it that it's kind of sounds formal in that, I'm going to put that on my calendar. So I put that on my calendar. I'm doing peer mentoring with my colleague from Canada, and mentoring each other. And it was awesome.
That's that kind of just reminds me of the old saying of surround yourself, you're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself by. And so if you seek that out, and I do that a lot within our business and in the community, and also just to learn from people. People are incredible. And when you can get that peer mentorship back, that's tremendous. So really appreciate that. Well, Carrie's given me the wrap it up thing. So other than we're going to have Q&A, but I would like to just follow it up with, so everything we've talked about today, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we go into Q&A?
Oh, I think the last thing I'd like to say is another thing that I've found in my conversations with women leaders is, I kind of mentioned it a moment ago, but the impatience of kind of worrying about things. But I want to just share that another concept that I keep front of mind and that I want to share is about seasons of life. And we all have seasons when we can put more into our career, when we need to put more into our family, when we need to put more into ourself, whether it's like, this is the time when I'm going to be learning new skills. And to really be patient with that and to understand that by making a choice, for instance, to, let's say, step aside for a bit to work on a skill or get a certificate or go to a Harvard business class or whatever, to not worry that that's going to get you too off track, but understand that's a season. This often happens around family and children.
Mhm.
And I have the example of parents in my family, in my situation, and elder parents. And so knowing that that's a season. So as an example, I had an employee this week that decided to, leave her career and stay home with her two children, two. And I just said, Abby, don't worry. It's a season. Don't stress too much. It's a season. It's important.
Mhm.
And you'll be back whenever you're ready, whether it's here or somewhere else. And just coaching other younger women about that and giving
Mhm.
them the permission to take a season
Mhm.
is something that I think is really important and something we have to support each other on as women.
Well, that's incredible, and really just timely. I feel like everything we've talked about today, I'd love to sit and talk for 2-3 more hours. My daughter's a senior, and so my first kid leaving, so we are in a season,
right.
and that season is shifting around the farm, in the family, in the business, and all things. So, and there are many, many times, and also those that I've had the opportunity to mentor, where it's okay. This is a season. And if we can support one another, it just helps those transitions go so much more. And quite honestly, life is short. So
Yeah, and we almost always need an outside person to give us permission on that season. It's almost rarely something we can give ourselves. So
something about that. Okay, well, thank you so much, Jennifer. It's time to roll into some Q&As. So they've given us a little bit of time here. We definitely want to get to them. I'm going to kind of work through these. So Eliza Carlson has asked, thank you so much. So I'm working on my master's degree right now, and my main project is creating workshops to help women agriculturists decrease their communication apprehension, public speaking anxiety when it comes to networking, learning, speaking up, and connecting with others in the industry. My question is, have you had to face that before? So, and what do you know, or do you know some tips to help with women agriculturists become more confident? So we kind of already touched on that, but I don't know if you have more that you'd like to speak
I'd love to
on
share.
That.
Yeah,
okay.
I'd love to share. Thank you so much. Is that Emma? Did you say Emma?
Eliza Carlson.
Eliza, for the question.
Yes.
Thank you, Eliza. So let me share some of my tips that I think are very helpful, especially in the comms, communication, and networking categories. So this is something that's a learned skill, especially networking, like going to the conference and going to the cocktail party. This is something I teach a lot in my staff too. And my main point, if you're going to remember one thing, it's think ahead. Don't go in with like a blank slate, go into a so think about networking. You don't go in with a blank slate. You think about, first of all, mostly everybody wants to talk. So you think about the 3 questions you're going to have in your pocket to ask anyone when you're there. So you don't go in blind or, just think, oh, I'll just come up with it then. No, be prepared. Don't worry. Don't be thinking about your questions. Think about them in advance. So, I sometimes, depends on the audience, I'll be asking, and it depends on the purpose too, right? So, but some of my favorite ones are, asking about what they're reading, asking if they've done any recent travel or if they have anything upcoming. Like if it's a social setting, you can do that. I always stay away from family, religion, politics, but asking those kinds of things. And not so much about what you're going to say, but the questions you're going to ask. That's very empowering to walk in and think, I'm not going to be stumped with what I'm going to ask. I'm going to be ready. So that's one of my biggest tips. And so, practicing those kind of questions. And again, depending on where you are. And so being prepared is, to me, not, and that for that. The other is being prepared for some of the basic questions you're going to get, like, tell me why you're here. So, tell me, they're going to say, why are you here tonight at this event or whatever. So being prepared with that. so you're not thinking it up in the moment is so empowering. And I've seen this, I learned this with my sisters because one of them really was not good at this and got really like decrepit in these settings.
Paralyzed.
Yeah, paralyzed. Sorry, I didn't use the
No,
right
you're
word.
good.
And it really helps her to be prepared. And I do it too. I go in and I never go into a board meeting, a conference without my set of questions. And it's in my head or I might even write them down.
Sure. I love it. I always talk about putting tools in my toolbox, and that is something new that I'm absolutely gonna take away from this. So here's an interesting question. How is the best way to, as a boss, how you're a boss, how is the best way to approach my boss without seeming too eager?
Approach them about what? Can they do it? Can I ask about?
Yeah, I don't know if she's put that up, but maybe let's talk about a raise or about a promotion.
Okay, yeah. So, well, let's talk about one or two things. We're going to talk about not a raise. We're going to talk about money and not money.
Okay.
So not money. If you want to approach them just to get to know them, I can tell you the boss is a person. Everyone's scared of the boss. So the boss really does like being engaged as a person. So I would think of any question you would ask, ask them, how is their family? Ask them. So it's not too eager to meet with the boss or approach them in an informal setting is always great. But if you have an idea, that's another thing to bring. Or if you have a question about where the company's going or where the division is going, that's good. And set a time and say, or I just wanted to get to know you and ask about their leadership journey. That's another way to approach it. No one ever says no to that. And, I'm trying to grow my career and I wanted to know a little bit more about you and ask for 15, 20 minutes. I think that's a great idea. Now, if it's about money and it's your boss and you want to talk about a raise or equivalency or that sort of thing, I would say start with, do your homework so you know what you're talking about. So why you think this is worthy, why you think it's the right thing. If you have any equivalencies of either other positions or in the organization or outside, always bring that. But more important, I would be talking about not just today, but I would approach a conversation about money, about where you want to take the company or what you want to do for the company. So I want to be, as an example, if I want to raise as a salesperson, I want to help grow sales 20% in my division in the next 2 years. I've already proven that I can do it at 5%. I want to do that. I'm asking for your support for a raise for me so that I can do that and help our company succeed. So not just about you, but it's about what you want to do for the company or the organization or the mission. And you put yourself in a bigger context. So any of us individuals is expendable, but that mission is not. And putting yourself in that, like aligning yourself with that mission, it gives you more protection, you're more formidable than if you go in just alone on your own.
This is incredible, Jennifer. Thank you so much for sharing this. These are things I think as a business owner, when my employees come to me, but also in really anything we do, if we can think about what is our purpose in this vision and our value in it, that's really what you're sitting down to talk about with whoever you're talking to. So incredible tools, again, to put in our toolbox. Thank you. This one's an interesting question. This kind of dials in a little bit more on you.
Okay.
How Carol from Redmond is asking, how long before you started to take it easy on you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carol. I've never been asked that one. That's really good. Probably when I became CEO, Carol. When for the first time I had the ability to set the table, set the agenda for the organization. And nobody ever before that, nobody ever said, you need to work harder, you need to work more out. Nobody ever said that to me. But I think I always wanted to be a CEO of an organization, and achieving that was a goal I had. By achieving that, then I could take a breath and set the table of the organization, set the standards I wanted, kind of create the organization I wanted, I'd always wanted to be in. And that's the great privilege of being a CEO, especially in a nonprofit or a small business. I think a nonprofit and small business are a lot alike, like what you all do on your family farms. I love the flexibility I have, the autonomy I have. You know, I don't have a big corporation. I don't have a government on top of me. You know, I have a board, and you probably have a family, you know, that you have to work with, but we have a lot of flexibility, a lot of independence, and that's a real privilege. So that's probably when it happened, Carol. Thanks for asking. But as an example, when I became CEO, I stopped working on the weekends. I still do some. Okay. I still do some. I don't mean to say never, but I gave myself permission not to work on weekends, to take a Saturday, you know, and that was because I was the boss. So I could say, we're not sending emails on the weekends. We're not calling each other on the weekends. And things like that was what I could do when I became CEO.
And can we add, Jennifer, that that's been for 10 years now? Is
Yeah.
that correct?
10 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So that leads into the next question very well. You have a remarkable career. Thank you so much for sharing that, by the way. But you are still very young. What are your plans for the future personally and professionally?
Yeah. So my husband is 10 years older than me. So I have a lot of dealing with that. I have parents who turned 80 this year in Kansas City. Yeah. And so, so what I kind of dream about is, I love 4-H, and I'm very, very happy there. But I do think about, you know, I will someday take another step. And so I think about maybe, for me, a thought has been international. You know, you heard my heart about loving what goes on in global 4-H, but knowing that's just not the mandate I have in my current role. And so maybe something with international ag and kids might be fun in the future. Also, I've also kind of enjoyed working with high net worth families and with foundations and things to make a difference. So I've also thought about whether I might have fun, you know, like working for the Kellogg Foundation or something like that, you know, in my future. But for now, I'm very happy at 4-H.
Well, it'd be incredible to have you on any team. So I'm sure there are opportunities to look forward to. This is an interesting question. So I have ideas about growing the company members and a suicide helpline and angel farming. Money is nice, but I want our farmers and ranchers to grow. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay, so growing a company that serves farmers, is that kind of what your sense is, Sean, from the question?
Yes, I think so. Or more so on the line of growing a company is great, but I think maybe what they're asking is they'd like to add like a suicide helpline and angel farming, kind of looking at that direction of would be kind of not so much on nonprofit, but essentially
giving back.
Yeah,
giving back. Yeah, yeah, that is awesome. And that's a very cool thing. It's actually another thing I've thought about in the future is, I forget what they're called, a C Corp, not a C Corp, but the ones that are companies that are incorporated for a charitable purpose. And that's another cool way to think about it. You may not want a nonprofit, although if you want the tax benefits, you're going to want that. But I would say, you know, the number one thing to me about starting something new, I don't care what it is, business, nonprofit, anything, product, whatever, is really understanding, is it already being done by someone else really well? And could I simply magnify that, amplify that? That'd be the first question I would ask about anything. We have a lot of too many nonprofits out there, all competing for board members, money, time, you know, all that, resources. So I'm disinclined to start new things unless it's like a business that's going to grow the economy. But I'm very thrilled that you're thinking about the very important things like a suicide helpline. This is a serious thing, especially with our young people. We all know it's been with our farmers, the farm and ranch stress. but also our young people. It is suicide, unfortunately, is now the second leading cause of death of young people in America after car accidents. So it is very upsetting. And so I'm glad you're thinking about that. I'm not sure if you're thinking about for youth or adults or both, but and whether that's a for-profit, nonprofit organization, I would look at who else is already doing it in my area, where is the gap, and then if that's something you need to do, I would go for it. But make sure you're not redundant. That's the main piece of advice I have.
That's great advice. There is a lot out there, and to recreate it sometimes isn't the best way. But
Or do you think about how do you improve on what it is?
How do you improve it?
Take it, white label it, whatever
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. And this one is from Lorinda. She said, you mentioned that with the help of your mentor, you learn to see yourself as someone who influences others. So through that, you learned that. What advice do you have for us to become more aware of how we can impact the lives of others?
Yeah. Well, for me, I would say, just one of the discoveries I've had as a leader, and Sean and I have talked about it today, is how much each of us, no matter what role we're in, need encouragement and to know that other people have confidence in us for what we're doing. It's kind of like a basic human need. And I have been surprised at how critical that is in the workplace, and how I have sometimes assumed folks knew I had that I had that confidence in them. I kind of assumed they knew I had it, so I put them in a role, but I didn't do the verbal affirmation of that and reinforce it, and let them say to me where they weren't confident. I know you can do this. What are the areas you aren't as confident in where we can work on it together? Like, I'm making it up, but like, preparing for the cocktail party or whatever.
Yep.
And that's probably the biggest thing I haven't done, is like, and I've learned to do, I didn't do it at the very beginning of growing other leaders, but that was to take that time to assume everyone needs that encouragement. There's very rarely the id people out there that don't need any encouragement at all or boosting to their self-esteem. So assume it, and then engage with them on, encourage them, but then also ask, if you have a good relationship, can you ask them to tell you what they need so that you can help them get over that? I know that's kind of like in the knit grit, but to me, that's how you make step changes in confidence, is to go at where the sore spot is and build that muscle. And when we can do that, that's the best. I think that's the best coaching we can give people.
That is so well said, in so many arenas, whether it's with children or with, anybody in our circles and those that we're mentoring. So thank you so much, Jennifer. I greatly, greatly appreciate your time today. And I see Isabella is on. Isabella, I think we'd hand the floor over to you if you'd like.
Yes, you too have been amazing. So I know, Jennifer, you are the guest, and you're genuine. I've got notes, like all kinds of.
I'm so glad.
And I think what's so great about having you on, and you as our first person, our first female leader, is your transparency, your honesty with us, and talking about the hard things too, and how we need to not only be comfortable with ourselves, but that we have to make choices, and they're most times only for a season. But we're so hard on ourselves that if we would allow ourselves those seasons, we could be even more productive and reach for those stars, and then, or what is it? Reach for the moon and grab a star on your way down, whatever that expression is. But I wrote several things down, and, we in Farm Bureau and in agriculture, and I think all over our culture in general, do receptions. So just having those 3 questions, or any number of questions in our pocket, life-changing, simple, but life-changing. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so great to be prepared.
It is. And, we go prepared for so many things in our life and don't think about that for a reception. we kind of go in, and I know a lot of people that go in, women or men, that go in challenged and stressful about it, and like, it's a reception. It's a reception. We get to meet people. We can
Think
ask
what you're going to
questions.
learn.
Yes, that's right. We get networks. And your tips, I wrote those down too. So whether Carrie wrote it down or not, Sean, I wrote them down.
Great.
Tell your story. That's something that we try and do with at the Women's Leadership Committee, is that boot camp, is to get women comfortable telling their story, because we've all got them. And you're so right. You are so right. So Jennifer, I don't want to repeat back to you everything that you said, although I think I could. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, to engage with us. If you feel so led, I'm not going to put you in a bad spot, but if you feel so led to put your contact information in the chat, and that women could contact you, if you would be willing to do that. I know that there's a lot of questions out there, and women that have so much appreciated what you've had to say today.
That's great. And I feel bad. I was going to offer, to answer any questions about 4-H too, but so I'm sending that, but I know it was great. All the questions were really about the leadership and everything. So that's terrific. But I did want to offer, if anybody has any questions about 4-H, I'd be glad to.
Well, thank you.
Answer what I can, but you guys probably know better. You're local. You're involved in the real stuff. I just work in Washington. So.
Okay. So one thing I've learned that I'll share with everybody, and you included, take that word "just" out of our conversation. Yep.
That's right. Good lesson. I take that. I will remember that. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing your contact information as well. I'm sure you're going to be getting some questions and probably some kudos as well. We truly appreciate you sharing your time, your life journey, your leadership journey with us, and your tips and advice. Thank you so much. I wish you nothing than the best for the future.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure and an honor to be a part of this. I'm so excited what you're doing, and I look forward to participating in some of the ones in the future. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us. Before we leave, I want to make sure you save the date for our next Ag ConnectHER, which is showing up on the screen right as I say it. Look at that. I love technology when it's working. So it will be September 5th, 2023, this year still at 8 p.m. We're going to keep the time the same, and you'll notice the QR codes. We want to stay connected with you, and we want you to be aware of what's going on, what we're doing when, as well as some of those things that I talked about earlier, the Women's Communication Boot Camp, when applications open, our ACE Summit, when registration opens for that. Our quarterly newsletter is a good way to stay in touch with us and to know what's coming up, as well as our Facebook page. So just hold your phone up, put it on camera, and if you'll hold it up there for the QR code, most of you probably know this. In case you don't, it'll show go to website, click that, and it'll pull the page up for you right away. That way we can stay connected with you. You can stay connected with us. So thank you all for taking your time out of whatever else you could be doing right now. And we all know that when we're doing one thing, we're not doing something else. So thank you for spending this season of time with us this evening on our inaugural Ag ConnectHER, and I look forward to seeing you next time, September 5th. Have a wonderful evening.